All right, well, welcome everyone to Monitoring Home Air Quality in Radon, a primer. This was approved for 1 hour in continuing education units, GBCI, AIBD, BPI, NonWholeHouse, as well as American Institute of Architects Health, Welfare, and Safety, which may make it applicable to your state-based design or contractor license. This session is brought to you by the nonprofit, the GreenHome Institute. My name's Brett Little, and I am the program manager here. And we're going to be talking about really, monitoring air quality in our homes as a starting place. And because it's Radon Awareness Month, we're going to be focusing there as a big issue, and how that plays into LEED and WELL. Before we get started, I want to say a big thanks to our top tier sponsor, Build Equinox, featuring the new Serve2 smart ventilation system. Unlike traditional ERVs or HRVs, it features qualities of smart balanced ventilation and feedback monitoring. With a standard ERV or HRV, you get a constant low airflow that has no relation to the indoor air quality and the real needs of the occupants or the day. And so you can see in this graph here depicted, for the first 3 days when the home is occupied, the air quality is poor. The ERV just can't keep up. When the occupants leave on vacation, the ERV keeps ventilating and wasting money and energy. Since the SERV actually monitors air quality, it ventilates only when it needs to. Compared to an ERV, the SERV can ventilate up to 300 CFM, quickly purging pollutants from the home. When no ventilation is needed, the SERV can recirculate, unify the home, and add some additional heating, cooling, dehumidification in an energy-efficient manner. The SERV does this by monitoring both CO2 and volatile organic compounds to determine when ventilation is necessary. These are preset by your clients to determine where they want to have their levels set at, and then it can automatically ramp up to exhaust them when needed. And instead of an ERV exchange core, the SERV uses a high-efficiency air source heat pump to exchange energy in the incoming supply and outgoing air. What does this mean? Conditioned, comfortable air that unifies the home instead of dragging exterior rooms away from comfort. The SERV's filter access panel allows the homeowners to easily access and inspect filters, and it comes with a traditional 10 by 20 filtration with MERV 13, which is, starts to control airborne viruses. It's very important. Very cool too, they're manufactured right in Urbana, Illinois in the US, 100% with their entire facility powered by solar. And it pairs very well with our friends over at Rheem Prestige ProTerra heat pump. They can work together. Helps distribute Mitsubishi's mini split air around the house to condition it properly. They can work together very well. And they work with our friends over at Water Furnace to have a GeoBoost system to sync up SERV to the geothermal system. So check them out over at buildequinox.com today. And thanks to our second tier sponsor, T-Stud, structurally insulated framing systems that save energy and money behind the walls. They come pre-insulated with foam or naked for your choice of insulation. They're now shipping today. Check them out at tstud.com. Well, again, I'm very excited to be talking about this important issue. Again, Radon Action Month is here. We're at the end of the month, but it's a good time to remind you that this is something to think about the whole year in all of your projects, no matter what. If you're working on green building projects, they give you a lot of great resources on how and why to do this and to get certified. If you're working on LEED for homes, we're going to talk a little bit about later. You've got radon-resistant construction practices during new construction and major renovations, and then practices on home improvements that can be LEED certified and what that means and what to look for. And then we're also looking at the WELL standard and even LEED O&M, which has requirements for ongoing air quality monitoring and meeting certain thresholds for radon. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And our speaker today, who's going to be guiding you through all this, is Michael Downham. He is the co-founder and president of Peer 365, a spinoff from the global wellness brand Peer Wellness, peerroom.com, founded in 2003, and awarded the Cornell University Innovation Award as a top hospitality amenity that counts the Ritz-Carlton, Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt as some of its hotel partners. Michael's majored in kinesiology and minored in nutrition and has always had a passion for healthy living. He has a deep background in regenerative organic agriculture indoor air quality, water quality, and other important aspects of wellness technology for the home. Michael has spoken about healthy homes and technology at numerous events across the country and educating businesses on how to incorporate wellness. And I'm very excited to announce that he recently is an officially WELL AP certified professional. So with that, Michael, I'm going to hand it off to you so you can keep us going, and welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for the nice intro, Brett. It's a pleasure to be with you and GreenHome Institute, and welcome everyone who's taking part in listening in today. Like Brett, you mentioned, this month is National Radon Action Month, and when we talk about indoor air quality, radon does not get enough attention. So we all know about the key aspects of air quality as it pertains to filtration and purification, ventilation, and humidity control. But often radon is the forgotten component of indoor air quality. So very excited to speak about the topic to all of you today and go through some of the main things. And we hope everyone listening to this can understand and be in a better position to protect yourself, your families, people around you. So what that graphic you see on here, it doesn't look very good, right? Radon is very potent. It's the second leading cause of lung cancer, and it's something not enough people track in their homes. So let's get started. So during this session, what we'll cover is why we need to talk about radon. It's not just for when you buy a home and you get it tested once. There's definitely an impact that radon has on all of us throughout the year, and the levels fluctuate throughout the year. Its impact on health, we want more than ever now, we're cognizant of the impact of our environment on our health, and radon is certainly one component of that. So how do we track it? The importance of tracking it in real time every single day is important, and we'll touch on that. And then the most important factor is when radon levels are above a certain threshold that's deemed harmful to our health, we want to kind of talk about how to mitigate against these impacts. Brett already introduced me. I've been in the wellness field since I've graduated from college, and my core competency is really in helping create healthy homes and putting in solutions, trackable solutions, so people can understand what the state of their environment is. So let me pose this question to everybody here. You see at the top, why is a healthy building or a healthy home important? Some answers are going to be very obvious. A lot of us will have different answers, but it's it's clear, especially the last year, that our environment has a major impact on our health. Since the 70s, 80s, when buildings started to get built more tightly, it became the onset of SBS, sick building syndrome. No one knows really what the causes are, but when you spend a lot of time indoors, you start getting these symptoms like headaches and asthma, and that's what sick building syndrome is. And we breathe 11,000. Well, some people who have bigger lung capacity breathe more, even up to 15,000 liters or more a day. But because air is invisible, we often don't think about when we breathe, how is that affecting what's being brought into our body and how is it affecting our health? And radon is one component of that. If we have high radon levels, we're breathing it into our body. It's affecting every cell in our body. So those are the things we have to think about when we talk about air quality. It's invisible. So how are we knowing how it's impacting our health? Another thing, this is something that we've all dealt with in the past year, but I want to show you a study that was done by the Harvard School of Public Health. This is pre-COVID even, right? So I'd be interested to see what a follow-up study is post-COVID. But what causes us as human beings the most stress? And as you can see from this study, it's really illness and disease, right? So if we If any of our loved ones, our family members, our relatives, our friends are afflicted with the disease, that is the #1 cause of stress. It really speaks to what we value the most in our life. It's really our relationships with the people around us. The other one is the percent who reported the greatest amount of stress in the past month. It's poor health conditions. So whatever capacity you work in, whether you're a builder, an architect, a real estate agent, an integrator, a developer, a practitioner, health practitioner, these are the most important things in people's lives. So we're in a position where we can have this great impact, where we're helping people avoid preventable disease, and we're going to speak specifically about lung disease and radon today. But everyone on this call and the work that we're doing, we just have so much ability to impact people's lives in a good way, because these are the things that cause the most amount of stress in our lives. So I just want to briefly touch on, okay, where is Healthy Home moving in the industry and with homeowners? As you can see, this is another study from Harvard University, but when people talk about what they're concerned about in the home, indoor air quality is at the very top, followed by water quality. And then you see all these other things that are very, very important to keep a clean environment that doesn't harm our health. When we go to the builder community and we ask, how will COVID change your sector? Once again, health and wellness and indoor air quality is at the very top. This is a study that was done May last year by Green Builder Media. Same study, indoor quality is a nice to have to a necessity, and it's almost as important. It is as important as location to some home buyers now. So wellness and health in the home or in the built environment is continuing to gain steam. So we as practitioners, or being in a profession that is tied to these things, it's a great opportunity for us to educate and make a great impact. I specifically come from the CI channel, where we bring technology into the home. And even in the CI channel, 89% of custom integrator companies deem wellness to be important to their clients and trade partners. And IAQ is the best potential wellness related growth category for the business. So we're seeing a huge boon in our channel and industry in terms of interest in how to make homes healthier. So let's get to radon, our specific, sorry. I'm gonna watch a quick.
That is something that we can inhale. It can get stuck with dust, and that we inhale the dust. And over a long time, it can cause damage in our cells, in the lungs, and then eventually cause lung cancer. If you smoke in your life, the risk of having a lung problem, especially lung cancer, can be higher than if you just smoke or if you just have exposure to radon.
So the doctor from Cleveland Clinic gave a brief background on what radon is, but it's a naturally occurring gas that is deadly if the levels are above a certain amount within a home. And it's one where the scientists are pretty sure is a main cause of cancer. Like the studies show very clearly that it's a class A carcinogen and it causes cancer in humans. And in the US, around 22,000 people die from it each year. And it's really preventable, because if you know your radon levels, you can do something about it, right? And the difficulty with radon is similar to carbon monoxide. It's colorless, odorless, and tasteless. So it's not like you can sense it and feel it and say, wow, something is strange here, gotta get checked out. You just don't know unless you have an instrument or a test kit that actually measures the radon level in your home. So as you can see, one person dies every 25 minutes, and it's really, really preventable. So this being January, we want everyone, like everyone I talk to, especially this month with the Radon Action Month being being promoted, we want everyone to get their levels tested and to figure out if they have any exposure. By the way, Brett, we're happy to field any questions as we go through and people have any curiosities. So when we look at the facts, right? If you look here in the middle, 6 times more deaths than house fires and carbon monoxide combined. Even this morning, I was watching the news, and a person in Brooklyn, they died from carbon monoxide inhalation, and it actually came from an appliance. So if you think about it, if they had a carbon monoxide detector and the alarm blared, or it was tied to some smart home lights and it flickered the red lights to show an alert, and the person was able to get out of the home in time, one precious life saved, right? So it's something where it's very sad when there are technologies and measures in place to protect us from these types of events, but when they're not, they can be catastrophic. So that's what radon education is all about. Getting people to test is the most important thing, and getting measures in place to warn people when those levels are above a certain picocurie level. So the other question is, are some regions within the states like less susceptible to radon or more? Very much so. So as you can see from this map, there is legislation by state that shows that that implement, if you have radon levels above a certain amount, you have to get mitigation. There are some states that don't have legislation. And then furthermore, there are some states that typically the average radon levels are lower than other states. Like Pennsylvania is very, very high, right? As you go to Florida, the radon levels are a little lower. But what I can say is that every home is different, right? So that's why it's so imperative to get tested, even though you live in a typical low radon state. But as you can see from here, the EPA estimates 62% or 200 million people are at risk. That's a huge, huge number. So we all have to be cognizant of our radon levels.
Michael, can you, so the statewide, but can you comment, because I know the EPA's got, there's sort of 1, 2, and 3 zones, right? And I don't know if you're going to speak to that, but can you comment to that? I mean, I just, as an anecdotal example, we were testing several homes in a zone 3. I believe 3 is the least worst zone out of 1 through 3 on the EPA. And we had a guy come in around somewhere around 26, with 4 being the action level. Now, we later found out he was a nuclear submarine operator, so we thought, well, it must just be radiating off him eternally. So, but seriously, I mean, we see it out there. So can you, I don't know if you're I don't want to get ahead, but are you going to speak to the zones and if those are pretty good, or if there's issues with those too?
That's a great, great question. And I don't have a map to show the different zones, but like you said, you can Google EPA radon zones, and they are different levels: high risk, mid risk, low risk. But as I mentioned before, even though you're in a low risk zone, you have to get it tested, because whether you're a nuclear submarine scientist and you're radiating it, it's not just coming from the ground. Radon is now being found in concrete. It's being found in granite countertops. So it's not just what's emanating through the cracks in your basement and coming up. So now I know that there are a lot of builders, and even in Europe, the most astute builders who are trying to build the most healthy environments, they actually, before they pour their concrete, they get it tested for radon. So they put it in their marketing that we tested the concrete and the radon levels are negligible. There's no radon risk. That's where things are moving in the builder community, more so in Europe than in the US, but I'm seeing a bit of it in the US as well. So radon is coming from multiple areas, and that makes it more imperative that everyone tests, because just because you're in a low risk area doesn't mean you don't have exceeding levels of radon that are gonna eventually over time expose you to lung cancer. I hope that kind of helped.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna look at some testing options here. If there are any real estate agents on this call, every sale, you gotta have a radon test, and if it's above a certain amount, it's gotta be remediated, right? So the problem with that is radon levels fluctuate throughout the year. So if you get that test at a time when radon levels are low, it provides a false sense of security, because you get the radon report, you're like, wow, it's 1 picocuries per liter, and the action level is 4 by the state. They're like, okay, I don't have to worry about this ever again. But lo and behold, that level can go above 4 the very next month, or 3 months later when the seasons change, right? Or when the weather patterns change. So it's a false sense of security. So that's one way that we're used to testing for radon. You can have a radon company come in and test it, but more often it's just a one-time test, right? So it's better than not having it tested. Maybe you get it tested every month, every quarter, but it adds up the cost, right? So these days there are monitors that you can put in place, and they give you real-time readings. So as you can see from here, they give you the last 48 hours, the average of the last week, the last month, the last year. You get a very good indication of where those radon levels are at throughout the year. And if they're low at one point and they start to climb at another, that tells you, wow, I got to do something about this. And Brett, I know you have a personal insight into these things, and we'll get you to chime in a little later in the session. So what do these numbers mean? So I can tell you that the PCI/L, it means picocuries per liter. That's what we go by in the US and North America. In Europe, they go by becquerels per liter. It's a little different measurement standard, but here we see picocuries per liter. As you can see from here, the typical standard is if you're above 4 picocuries, you got to do something about it. And what does that mean? If you're at 4 picocuries, it's the equivalent of taking 200 chest X-rays, right? That's what's leading to lung cancer eventually, because that constant exposure, right? And that's the EPA radon action level. The WHO is a little lower, and I always go by this because any exposure is bad exposure. So I always tell people try to be under 2.7. Actually, I try to be under 1 even, because if you look at 1, it's the equivalent of smoking 2.5 cigarettes a day, right? So if you're at 2, which is significantly below the EPA standard and the WHO standard, it's like smoking 5 cigarettes a day. You times that by a week, by a month, by a year, and you can see why any exposure is bad exposure. So, for example, my home, I track it every day, just like Brett does. I'm typically at 0.4, 0.3, and I'm constantly trying to figure out ways to get it even lower, right? The outdoor average radon level is 0.4, 0.34-ish. So that's really, really where you want to be. But these are the benchmarks set out by world organizations, health organizations.
Do you have, this is fascinating, really sharing this number scale here and comparing it to cigarettes per day. Do you have a resource or a link you could share with us later on where you got that from?
Certainly. I mean, you can Google World Health Organization radon action level, EPA. It'll all come up, but
Okay,
I do have the links to share.
Thank you.
I'm a WELL AP now, so I wanted to introduce the WELL AP standard. It's what LEED is to create sustainable, energy efficient buildings, and they do have a health component to it as well. WELL strictly focuses on the occupant of the building, the health of the occupant, which is fantastic to see. They're doing a massive campaign right now with very well-known celebrities and health practitioners to really promote the importance of health in a building and the built environment. So for those who aren't familiar, the WELL building standard, they have many different concepts as to what constitutes a healthy building. Goes from air quality, water, fitness, nourishment, the mind, comfort, things like that. 7 concept areas. And what I want to show you is the air concept. And within air concept, there are 29 features, right? 12 of them are prerequisites. You have to abide by these standards to qualify to be WELL certified. And the top 12, one of them being air quality standards here. And as you can see from part 3, it says the following conditions are to be met in projects with regularly occupied spaces at or below grade. Radon less than 4 picocuries per liter in the lowest occupied level of the project. So they go by the EPA standard, not the WHO standard. And it's a requirement. So if you get tested in a building and it's above 4, you cannot get WELL certified. It has to be less than 4 in the lowest occupied level of the project. And there's someone who comes out and does a test for it. Right? They send it out to the lab. It's got to be under 4. It's got to be tested regularly. So that's radon. And within the WELL, there's other requirements like CO2, particulate, ozone, formaldehyde. And maybe in future sessions, we can go into details on those things. But for radon in particular, this is the only section in WELL, and you got to be under 4 picocuries per liter.
You know, there was a question, Michael, so you can just kind of reiterate it. And obviously, we're an organization that's focused mostly on homes. And in many cases, sometimes we're dealing with mixed-use buildings where you've got commercial on the first floor. So what can you say to, is radon still something you need to test for that you should be looking at on, mixed-use buildings on commercial floors on the first floor, or even office buildings that just have one floor? Is that something that's required, or is this just a residential issue?
You want to definitely check whether you're mixed use or commercial as well, because they're all, radon is emanating from the ground through cracks. And so typically you test at the lowest occupied level because as you go up, it's going to dilute and dissipate, right? So you're going to have less of a risk, but you definitely want to test in any of the lowest occupied levels of a commercial space. And WELL is really focused on commercial right now, but they are doing pilots, also multi-build residential units. And they are, as I understand, speaking from someone at WELL recently, they are working on a residential certification as well. So, any built environment, any building that we spend our time in, I think WELL is going to effort to really branch out and focus on.
Thank you.
So this is a picture. We talked about how radon enters the home, but let's look at it, right? So radon is forming underneath through soil gases, moisture is coming up through the slab, and in the cracks, it's coming up. So how do we mitigate against it? The number one effective method to mitigate against radon coming into our home is through active soil depressurization. The short acronym is ASD. So as you can see from this image, this picture, we punch a hole. That's the subslab depressurization. And then you have a fan within this pipe system that is drawing the soil gases, drawing the radon into the pipe and sending it outdoors so it's not coming into the ambient air of the home. And a side benefit of that is you're actually sucking moisture. Basement, subslab areas are the areas where we have the most moisture. If you live in a high humidity area like Michigan and where I am in New York, in the summertime, the basement gets moldy, you get that musty smell. But the side benefit of putting in an active radon mitigation system is not only are you pumping the radon out of your house through a fan, through these pipes, you're actually taking the moisture away with it. So you get a much less moist environment having this active soil depressurization system in your home. So speaking of humidity, it's a little side tangent. It's a whole topic on its own, and it's a core element of indoor air quality. Like I said, it's the trifecta. It's ventilation, it's filtration, it's humidity level. We should add radon to it, but humidity levels, this is how it's impacted. And a lot of studies last year on humidity levels impact on COVID transmission. So as you can see here, if you have humidity levels below 30, you're more susceptible to COVID transmission. And why is that? It's because the mucous membranes where COVID enters through, so it's the nose, eyes, and mouth, typically, right? The mucous membranes, they dry out at lower humidity levels. So that impacts the defense mechanisms in those mucous membranes, in the nasal passages, in the eyes, in the mouth, from properly addressing the virus that's trying to find a host in our bodies, right? So when the humidity levels are between 30 and 50, I always say 40 and 50 are the really ideal ranges, but you know, Well says 30 to 50, other bodies say 40 to 60, but I typically try to say 35 to 50 is really the magic area where your systems are optimized to protect against viruses and bacteria. So we don't want to be too low, and then on the other side, we don't want the humidity levels to be too high because that elicits conditions where mold, dust mites can thrive. So too low, too high, they're both gonna result in things that can impact our health and be detrimental to our health.
Yeah, Michael, I'm glad you brought up the question of humidity, right? We always tend to focus on high humidity issues, which are bad, right? Mold, but kind of, you know, just brushed low humidity issues kind of under the rug and said, well, that's just the way it is. You got to deal with dryness in the winter, like we're at, especially, you know, bloody knuckles. And so, but, you know, we've long known that influenza spreads faster in drier air, and now it seems like COVID is. So I appreciate you bringing that up. The question is, I thought I've also seen some studies saying not only does it spread easier, but potentially if you have it in your dry air, that it could be more dangerous. Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, I've seen studies like that too. Yeah, there's multiple factors in terms of humidity and how COVID the transmission can be reduced or increased, but that's definitely a factor. Yeah.
So typically homes have, you know, these furnaces running and their air dries out. How does, I mean, and I know we have a lot to discuss more about radon, but just briefly, you know, how does dry air play in, you know, commercial settings? Is it an issue just like homes? Are most commercial systems there to alleviate those issues?
So yeah, most people aren't aware of it. So this is great that we're having this talk, but I'm in the home wellness technology field. And so what we do is we always recommend a whole house steam humidifier. And if you have something like that in your duct system, you can pretty much set it at 40, which I set mine at 45 degrees in the winter. And if it gets more dry, it's tough to keep it at 45. Sometimes it drifts down to like 40, but it's almost like a thermostat. You set the temperature and you set it and forget it. You can do that in your home with humidity too. Just a lot of people don't know about it. So it's really important. Temperature is more for our comfort, but when you set the humidity at between 40 and 50, it's really protecting you against viruses and drying out your mucous membranes, bloody knuckles, all those things that are uncomfortable and a little having a negative impact on our health.
Thank you.
And one more thing, studies have also showed that with higher humidity levels above 60%, it creates a condition where it pulls more off gases or VOCs from the paints, furniture. So with a higher humidity, you're actually getting a higher rate of VOC off-gassing. So really, it's really imperative to have humidity control systems in your home or office. Just set it and forget it in between the 35 and 50 range. So with anything, oh my goodness, I have high radon levels. Can I afford to actually put in an active depressurization system, slab? So as you can see here, the radon systems are typically a whole system like what you saw in that diagram. I paid a little over $1,000 for that system, and I'm protecting my family against radon, right? So it's not a huge cost compared to others. You look at hiring labor to replace just your furnace, not the cost of the furnace, just the labor to put it in is like $2,000. Just the labor to do a roof repair is like $3,000, right? So comparatively, in terms of home improvement, it's very on the low end. So let's say you get your monitor, real-time monitor in your home, and it comes up very high. What do I do about it? It's an excellent resource, radon.com. You just type in your zip code, and you can find the local radon mitigation professionals. And like I said, a lot of them will charge in the $1,000 to $1,500 range. And if they're much above that, you need to shop around because they shouldn't be charging that much, unless your house is really big and you need several, right? So that's a resource I'd like to provide you. And next, Brett, you're very tied into LEED Indoor Air Plus, the industry requirements. Why don't you take it away from here?
Yeah, thanks. So, briefly, I want to talk a little bit about during the new construction process and major renovation process, strategies you can use that are, I would argue, are applicable to multifamily and then also small light commercial construction practices. Because as Michael said, radon, it impacts all of our buildings wherever we're at on the ground floor. We need to address it. Now, the folks over at EPA Indoor Air Plus really put together some great kind of a three-step path. And so LEED basically took that and added a few different features to it. But the reality is what we're looking for is a capillary break, an electrical outlet, and then a 3 or 4 inch gas type vertical vent pipe that has minimal bends in it to make sure that radon gets out. Either that or elevating the house as well can be helpful, and that's sometimes done in floodplains too. So next slide on that. So in practical sense, here's some plans from some actual LEED projects we've worked on. You can see on the left there, you just got a nice little detail of it down in the slab and having those tight seals. And then you can see that there's, 2 90-degree bends, which aren't ideal, and then it kind of goes up and bends 24 inches above the roof to get that radon out. On the right side, you can see we've got this really kind of perfect straight radon pipe vent. And you can see it's got the notes on the plans for the junction box. So again, one of the ways, if you do this right from the start of the construction, what you're dealing with is a more energy efficient way to reduce radon, right? So, you don't have the active fan running unless you need it, but it's pre-designed so you don't have to go in and do it other than just plug in the system and activate it if there's a problem later on. So that's really how they've designed that program, for an energy efficient way to help mitigate radon and then designed if a problem occurs. And so this is only something you have to do in zone 1. If you're in zone 2, there's an extra point and nothing in zone 3 from EPA. So, and here's just some real life world examples from LEED projects. On the left, you can see during a slab inspection, we're looking for that radon pipe coming up in the permeable layer and looking at the proper capillary break while we're there. In the middle, you can see this is during like a pre-drywall visit. You see it in the basement going straight up, none of those bends. And then on the right, when you're looking in the attic, the energy rater's looking in the attic for insulation and air sealing and all that. They're going to be looking for that junction box that's wired up, it's got power to it, and it could be ready to plug in an active system should there be a problem. Next slide. And then on existing homes, what you're going to do is you're going to take a test. And just as Michael alluded to, just because you take one test doesn't mean you're good. But from a LEED standpoint, they're fine with that. So they got to set the bar somewhere, and maybe that'll change. But you take that test. If it's lower than 4, you're fine. If it's more than 4, and this is irrelated of the, or only if you're in the zone 1 too, you don't have to take it if you're not in the zone 1, then you're going to do the type of install where you're retrofitting one in, but it has to be active to make sure it's getting out. So you can see on the left, this is actually a photo of my install. I don't have a LEED house, but you can see the electrical junction box connected to the system that's constantly powering it. On the right, you can see this isn't ideal. It's not all the way up over the roof, but you know, that's okay. It's an existing home and it's not part of the requirements. It's as far as they could get it. This is the best you can do on an existing home. And then you can see on the right, that's the interior side of where that pipe goes in on the left into the basement. And then they plunge it down, drill it into the ground. And you can see that it's got a little bit of a significant bend to it, but it still gets the job done. So this is kind of what like an existing active system looks like. This is what you would do for LEED if there was an issue and you couldn't do the full slab solution. And it's something we recommend for all homes. I mean, this set me back in my big project that I did that I have more details on, you know, maybe $600. I mean, the prices are coming down. They're getting really good at doing this. And it depends on your house and what the issues are and the challenges are. But, you know, I would say what's $600 worth? How much does lung cancer cost to deal with? It's going to be thousands. So highly suggest it. And, you know, that's how it ties into, you know, LEED and what you could do on a commercial building. So, you know, I wanted to share a story that, you know, I have. And so for me, before I started my project, I did a radon test in my lower level in the middle of summer. And I think at one point we had cracked a couple windows open, so I may have ruined it a little bit. But it came back, even then, it came back at 3.3. And remember, 4 is bad. So, you know, I was like, all right, you know, 3.3 in the basement with maybe accidentally opening the windows. That's just cutting it too close. I don't feel good about this. You know, got kids potentially sleeping downstairs. I work downstairs. So let's get a system. So I put my project plan together. We got a system installed, as I showed you. We got it up and running. It was working. And then, you know, lo and behold, you can see, and I'll get to this, but our air quality monitor in our house, starting back in June this year, was showing decent radon levels and then spiked as we got closer into November, and then started to go down right when we installed the system. But right after we installed it, there was a massive outage. And the power came back on within a day, but the problem was that it stripped the breaker. And so the radon system failed to reactivate. Now, any normal person who's not me, who doesn't have a radon sensor installed in their house, would have never known, right? They would have never thought of this. And there's no way to ever know unless you went down in the basement and looked. And so one of the ways you could have known is you could go down and see this picture on the right. And if those two blue lines were even, right, then you would know that you've got a big problem on your hands. You want to see them the way they're doing it here. So maybe you were informed by the radon professional to look for that every now and then. Maybe you remembered, maybe you didn't have a million other things you had to do, plus living in a global pandemic on your mind that you needed to think about this. But if you have a radon system that's constantly monitoring it like I do, that I think we should all have that are pretty affordable, you will see that it gave me an alert because I just check this every day for radon and other issues. So we went down, returned the system on, and then you can see just the numbers plunged on the right there. And you can see this is a screenshot in the middle there, 0.4 of where I was at today. So it kind of hovers around there. So it's very important. I think you can do all this LEED stuff. It's great. Put the system in. It's great. But you need to have a way to know for sure it's working, or you just paid $1,000 for something that could be useless if you don't have something that's constantly giving you that feedback, and to ensure that it actually worked, right? You want to hold the contractors accountable for that. So I think it's really important.
Brett, I have the exact same monitor. I'm at a similar monthly average, and the only difference is yours is blue and mine's red on the thing there. But I have a very similar story. Before I put my monitor in, I have my mitigation system, but I don't go every day down there to check if they're even or uneven, right? And so before I had my monitoring system, one day I was just going down into the basement and working on something, and then I saw it was even, right? So I was like, there's something wrong here. And then I discovered after 10 years, my fan went dead. But the problem is, I don't know when the fan went dead. It could have been 3 months before, it could have been 5 months before. And all that time, my radon levels were very, very high. There's no doubt about it, just like what you have on the screen. So after that, that's when I really started saying, I got to find a real-time radon monitor. That's why I got this one. And from then on, I'm at peace because I can see my levels every day. And we get power outages where I live, like 3-4 days at a time. Exact same thing happens. The fan cuts out and then the radon levels go up. So we actually sleep on the top floor when that happens because we want less exposure to radon. Eventually, the next thing is to get a solar panel and battery, so we never have to deal with that, even in power outages, right? So these are all little things that everyone can take to, these are lessons we learned, right? So it's really, really important to get that real-time monitoring in your home.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, and I'm sorry that it happened. I'm glad I'm not the only crazy one to be looking at something like this. It feels good to not be alone, talking about air quality with someone and monitoring it. This is important. We've got member builders and architects who actually hand out these devices. It's like a thank you gift to their client, right? It's so cheap. And when they do the homeowner walkthrough, because green building certification requires you train your homeowners, right? They hand them these devices and they say, look, here's how you use it. Here's what to look for. This is a thank you gift for working with us. It just really goes a long way. It's one thing to say, yeah, you build a good home. It's another thing to get it certified, which is good. And then it's a third thing to actually say, look, I trust what I did is right. I'm going to give you this system to prove it. And it's going to help you out. So, it's something that you could consider if you're involved in projects and helping clients.
Nicely said. So we'll wrap up with just basic, simple pointers. Aside from radon, radon was the topic of the day. Hopefully we conveyed the importance of it. But particulate matter in the home or office, that includes COVID, right? It's a particle. It's a viral aerosol that's 0.1 micron in size. And so it's really good to mitigate against that through advanced filtration. Make sure when you're cooking, I'm surprised by a lot of people I ask, they don't turn on the vent hood when they're cooking. When you're actually cooking and you have an air quality monitor there, it will, it's akin to the worst or the most polluted areas on Earth. When you're cooking, those VOC levels and particulates, they shoot up, and it shoots up to levels like in India and China where the worst levels are globally. A lot of people use candles and fragrances. If you do the research, there's many, many carcinogens in those, in what comes out of there, emanates from there. Really important to use organic, certified organic oils for using fragrances and scents in the space. And we talked a bit about humidity. And then it's important to track air quality outside. A lot of you, it's tough to be cooped up at home, so we take moments of the day to go outside and take a jog or a walk. Track the air quality throughout the day and go out when the air quality is good, because you're breathing in bad air quality, it's going to affect your health. So just basic tips that I like to share with people. And that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, Mike, we do have some questions coming in. You can stick around, answer some questions with us, right?
Sure.
Yeah, great. And I wanted to piggyback off to something you had mentioned about cooking, PM 2.5. Obviously, we recommend trying to cook more electric. If you love cooking, you probably hate electric, so induction. We know that's going to significantly reduce emissions, and especially if you've got a connected hood range. But even I have an electric stove, and I have a PM 2.5 monitor, separate than the one that I showed you earlier. Unfortunately, that one doesn't have it. But even when I'm cooking on electric, you just burn a little bit of noodle water, right? It's like it splashes out, it hits the pan, your PM 2.5 numbers hit wildfire levels within a second, and it's everywhere. And you just smell a little burnt, but you don't see that, and you don't see it going into your lungs. So no matter what, we are recommending now track that PM 2.5, and especially have that range running and vent it outside, just from a safety standpoint. So thank you for hitting on that too. It's very important, and I've seen it with my own two eyes looking at it on the tracking side. So yeah, before we get to the questions, I just want to remind everybody that if you're looking to pick up your continuing education units, please take that survey that pops up at the end. It's the same survey that'll get sent to you an hour later. Please only take it once. And even if you don't need CEUs, please take the survey. We want to hear from you. How can we do better? What did you like? If you're watching this in the future on demand, take the quiz, get an 80% passing rate, and then you can pick up your CEUs. To find that quiz, you can go to our YouTube channel, click on the YouTube link, and then click on the Show More drop down under the description. And then on the right, you can see, scroll all the way down, you'll find a direct link to the quiz, and you can take the quiz and get your CEUs that way. And before we get to all those questions coming in, a huge thanks to our board of directors, all of our volunteers, our new executive director, and our top tier sponsors, Mitsubishi Electric, for going all electric net zero air source heat pump systems that work when it's super cold right now. Rheem air source heat pump water heaters that work very well, and Build Equinox smart ventilation to know what's in our air and to keep us all healthy. Very important. Thanks to them and all of our sponsors. So yeah, so a lot of questions coming in. I want to try to get to as many as we can, and then we'll give everyone your contact information, right, so they can follow up with you a little bit later if they'd like. And hopefully some of these were answered, during the session. I didn't know if you had any thoughts. Obviously you showed those little radon test kits. And I wanted to let everyone know that I've had some success going to my county health department and asking for those kits and letting them know, especially when we were working on low-income housing projects, letting them know what we were doing. And at one point we had like 60 of them donated to us. So if you have issues or have clients that are having concerns about paying for the kits as just a starting point, go to your county health department. They have them. They usually sell them for a really good deal, and maybe they'll help you out. But beyond that, I know home inspectors kind of have a step up from that, Michael. I mean, do even the ones that home inspectors use that they kind of leave behind face some of the same problems you mentioned about maybe not being planted at the right time of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I was doing inspections with homes and implementing a lot of those test kits. But one recommendation is, if anyone is on this call, you can easily go to a radon kit distributor and open up a trade account, and you can get it at wholesale price and give access to people who may not afford it as well. Like, home inspectors mark it up, right? So I know what the margins are, and it's very, very reasonable if you buy it at wholesale cost. And we're able to, I mean, so many people are suffering, especially during these times, and low-income families. We have to find a way to help them live in healthier environments. And Brett, awesome suggestion. I mean, everyone is willing to help where they can. But that's one way, opening up a trade account, getting at a low cost, under $50, and being able to help the people around. But that's the drawback. The only time people get these tests are when they buy a home or they rent a home. That's really, really the drawback that I've seen. And that's why whenever I speak to anyone about radon, I always recommend getting the type of monitor that you can track every day over months, and to really see what the trends are in your space.
Thinking of costs of these ongoing monitoring systems, without getting into all the systems that are out there or naming anything specifically, do you have an idea of where the price point should be, either from the kind of air quality that we should be monitoring, so CO2, VOC, PM2.5 radon. Where should, I mean, obviously, I assume there's systems out there you get what you pay for, right? You don't pay anything, you're going to get something that's not great. And maybe ones that kind of tell you they're going to do a lot, overcharge, and don't work so great. Do you see like a good middle ground to really know that you're getting the right information?
So I'm excited to speak on this because I'm a monitor aficionado, so to speak. I have like over 15 monitors in my house. They're all different brands, so I'm a very deep insight into which ones work well, which ones bring a certain element that others don't. So there are monitors that have 9 sensors that include carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, ozone, things that the basic ones don't. Basic ones typically have temperature, humidity, VOCs, CO2, and particulate. You got to have those 5 as a basic one, but then others they add on top of that, right? So it's really about where your taste is. Do you just want to have that basic core information on your built environment, or do you want to know all these other things like ozone? Carbon monoxide is very important. Like I said this morning, if you have a carbon monoxide and you tie it to your lights, your smart lighting, like I'm a deep sleeper, so sometimes I don't hear my alarm, but if the light's flashing, I'll notice it, right? That's imperative. That's the difference between life and death, especially for someone like today who I saw on the news. It's so heartbreaking to see that, right? So then there's the radon monitor. Well, I can tell you is that they range from the low 200s, maybe high 100s mark, all the way to the 300s. So I typically tell people, start with 1 in the area you spend the most time in, like your bedroom, and then you expand it into areas like your living room and kitchen. Because of that cooking activity, you want to know, because when you see those things go up immediately, if you're not used to turning your fan on, you see the levels shoot up, then you're like, okay, I'll turn my fan on. So those are things that elicit healthy lifestyle behaviors to optimize the health of your home for your family. And that's where the latest technology comes in to help in those things.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think we'll have to have you back on to do a comparison and contrasting of air quality monitors. Sounds like it would be a great session. But you know, the strategic placement of these devices, obviously, you know, we know there are standards out there that are starting to recommend that just like fire alarms and CO detectors, we should have these placed, you know, all throughout our house. And I like how you had mentioned where you spend the most time. It seems like these days, if someone asked me, where do you spend the most time in your house? I would say, yes, I'm here every day now. I don't go anywhere because of everything. And I think that's a lot of people. But so, yeah, you pick a certain spot, I guess, and maybe this is just an anecdotal question, but where, I mean, how much inferences besides PM 2.5 coming out of the kitchen and radon coming out of the basement, how many inferences could you make, like, oh, if you have a monitor placed in your living room and these are your average CO2 levels, could you suspect that that's what's going to be occurring too throughout the rest of the house, or do you think it's really important that you have them everywhere?
It's very different. Like I said, I have them all over the house. And yeah, certain things like temperature are going to be very similar. It depends on how you zone out your home. But
yeah, you would hope,
but typically humidity levels are higher on the top floor in the winter, obviously, because on the ground floor it's going to be drier. Those are things that I've gained insight just by having so many monitors across my house. But yeah, CO2 levels, it all depends on who's in the room. So if everyone's convening in the living room at 6 o'clock to watch the evening news and get ready for dinner, everywhere else the CO2 levels may be okay, but it's going to start rising in that area. So what we really work on is automating the home. So when those levels go up, then it brings in fresh air and pipes it into that area to bring it down, right? So you know, this session is not so much about giving specific models and makes, but if anyone is interested, I'm always talking about these things. So reach out to me. I'll kind of give you a prescription on, I'll ask a few questions and I'll give my advice on where you can deploy it. But I always tell people, if you have to start with one monitor, start with a radon one on the lowest occupied floor, because that's the most urgent. And then go to your bedroom and then the living room. Those are the top 3.
Oh, so you said top floor, bedroom, then living room?
No, so radon monitor on the lowest occupied floor is really, I see it as the #1 priority to get intelligence on. Yeah. And then air quality monitor in your bedroom, because you're there 6, 7, 8 hours a day, right? Mm-hmm. And then the next place where you spend the most time, typically the kitchen, living room, or your home office.
Great, thanks. So there were a lot of questions coming in about construction details for radon systems, and that's really cool. I think that's a whole nother session we'll probably need to look at just from the construction standpoint. But what I mean, obviously, you know, a lot of folks are in our homes, offices have been abandoned, but we're getting back. We're trying to get back to work and hopefully getting back safely. It seems like well is a good strategy to maybe help folks get back to work safer during these uncertain times. Can you just speak to that a little bit and what you're seeing out there?
Yes, so post-COVID well, aside from their well certification, their silver, gold, and platinum levels, depending on how you address the 100 futures that they lay out. They have something called the health safety rating. And if you Google well health safety rating, an awesome video just came out this past week. J-Lo, Lady Gaga, Michael B. Jordan, Vanessa,
I saw that.
yeah, Venus Williams or Serena Williams, they created a video to show how important it is to have this health safety rating, because it addresses most of the issues that people are concerned about. So when you see that health safety rating, you're assured that this environment or this building is a much safer environment to be in. So that's something to look out for, that certification, that health safety rating.
Sure, absolutely. Looking at, you know, you had mentioned earlier about radon being worst time of the year. Do you know specifically? I mean, I'm about 6 months in right now, and now, of course, I have reduced radon, so it's skewed my result. But is the worst time of the year you had mentioned for radon kind of a different time of the year everywhere, or is there just a standard season where it could be worse or better?
It's tough to answer that, because typically for me, I'm in the New York region, the levels are higher in the summertime. In the winter, they're lower, right? I've had my system for 3-4 years now, so I could recognize those things. I don't particularly know if that's the same thing everywhere, but particularly in the Northeast, that seems to be the case. But that's why, because there's so much variability. That's why it's important to take it at a home by home basis.
You know, I thought one thing I've been noticing that's interesting on my tracking is it tracks pressure as well. And anytime those storm systems come in, you know, you get these massive pressure deviations. And I've noticed, and I got to go back and look at the data, but I just wanted to say I've noticed that when you get those big pressure deviations, my radon seems to spike during a certain, I can't know if it's on the upswing or the downswing yet, but there does seem to be this spike. And every time I'm like, why is it spiking? What is it? Oh, there's a storm coming or came, and there's this deviation. So something interesting. I don't know if you know anything about pressure and radon.
Weather patterns and air pressure definitely have an impact. And we talked about subslab depressurization, but there are other methods to lower those levels. One of them is positive pressure. So if you have an ERV, these days you can kind of have a slight imbalance where you bring in more air than you're sending out, causing positive pressure. So when you're building as positive pressure, there's less susceptibility to radon entering your space. So that's one area, one way to do that. And then simply bringing in outside air where the radon levels are lower, you dilute the radon levels indoors. So there are tier 2, tier 3 methods of minimizing radon levels in the home as well. But definitely, to answer your question, air pressure, weather patterns have a definite impact on radon levels.
Yeah, thank you. The question coming in here, and I know it's a bit of a loaded question, but you know, someone's just looking if there are systems out there that can test, you know, radon, mold, CO, and then they said other toxic chemicals. And I guess when I hear other toxic chemicals, I hear breaking down the VOCs. So, like for example, I know formaldehyde is a insidious chemical to try to track on its own as far as costs go. So I guess it's kind of a two question in one. Like, one, have you seen a good system that kind of tracks those items? And then two, where are we headed with potential formaldehyde tracking? Is it going to ever be affordable?
So that's the thing. Like you said, these monitor companies, they can't put every single sensor or else it'll just price it out of the market, right? So they go with the basic VOC sensor. But more and more, like I talk to these companies all the time, both A-grade sensors, B-grade sensors. A lot of them are moving towards a modular hardware setup where you can, based on what you want, you actually buy it with this module, and then later on you can swap it out with another one. That's really the future of monitoring. We're still in the very early stages. A lot of these companies are simply 4 or 5 years old. Even the sensors, even 4 years ago, they would fail after 6 months. So I still have some of those monitors, and my particulate levels are like sky high. When I know I'm taking my medical class laser particle counter, I know it's not the truth, right? So the sensors are advancing. A lot of the companies are moving towards modular, so that's going to benefit where you live and what you need, what you want. And with anything, when there's more massive adoption, the cost of these sensors go down. So I do believe in the next 3 to 5 years and past that, you are going to be able to get a toluene or formaldehyde sensor and be able to track that specific chemical.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a great question that came in. You know, I've heard this time and time again and haven't looked into it anymore, but, you know, I've heard theories that radon gas might be coming up in well water, like in the water itself. Do you know anything about that?
Oh yeah, definitely radon is coming through the water as well as the air. So that's why with water, it's important to have purification systems that can address that. And in the same way, the monitors are going to be modular. Now, a lot of the companies, the innovation that I'm seeing, even the water treatment and the softeners and the carbon filters, they're starting to become more modularized. So they will do a water test, and then when you bring the treatment systems in there, you can put in media that specifically deals with that radon. So that's the future of water treatment as well.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll have you back on to talk water. It's a huge issue I saw was just commoditized, right? It's getting traded now, right?
Brett, there's no tap water that is without PFAS and chemicals, contaminants, pharmaceuticals, heavy metals, right? And there are multiple grade of filters, right, that deal with ultrafine, microfine, nanoparticles, but the most dangerous contaminants in the water are the smaller particles. So you can have a filtration system, but if it's not dealing with the smallest particles like the heavy metals and the PFAS, you're getting rid of the big stuff like, you know, hair, red blood cells, all these sand, sediment, but you're still bringing into your body the most dangerous ones. So really got to be able to drink anything coming into the body. You got to have contaminant free, and that's how you take care of your health, right? I would love to talk about all of these things if there's an opportunity.
Yeah. Well, you know, yeah, like you said, we could talk about health strategies and opportunities and challenges all day long. It's what's on everyone's mind, as you showed at the beginning. It's leading to our stress with COVID. How can we be more healthy? So I think this is definitely a great start, a good thing to think about that often gets left behind, radon, for Radon Action Month. So I appreciate you coming out and to talk us through a lot of this. And yeah, we'll definitely have to have you back out this year, you know, and thinking about how can we be healthier in our homes and help our clients be healthier. So with that, where can people go to contact you if they want to learn more or get any more information?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I post a lot of stuff. So if that's interesting to you, you can look me up, Michael Donham. I'll connect with you right away. My email is mdham@pure365.com, so you can email me as well. And yeah, Brett, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to future collaborations.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. Thanks, pure365.com. We really appreciate all your time. Thank you all for joining us. We hope that you'll have a great rest of your week and you stay safe and well out there. And just know that we love doing these webinars, but we want to do some in-person sessions at some point and see your faces at some point. So we know that there is a new COVID variant on the loose. It could potentially reinfect. We don't know yet. We just know to continue to follow the guidelines, to stay in when you don't have to go, do remote meetings when you can. Please stay masked at all times when you can, social distance. And we know that building science can help us. We know we can ventilate our buildings. We know we can add filtration. We know that we can humidify our buildings in UV, and we know we can get back to work a lot safer. So I hope you'll join us to get the message out about that. And we hope we can beat this thing together, and we'll see you next week. So bye-bye.
Be safe and well, everyone. Bye.
Be sure to check out all of our courses available online that you can watch anytime and anywhere to pick up your CEUs. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to get weekly updates and stay up to date on green building science courses, webinars, and home tours. Thanks again.